This morning hit me like a bomb wrapped in small talk. Hey babe, just a heads up. I hooked up with Tyler from work at the conference last week. It was amazing. Thought you should know. I read it once. The words bounced off my brain like they were in another language. I blinked hard, hoping I'd misread it. Maybe autocorrect butchered something harmless into a nightmare. I read it again, slower this time, letting each word seep in like poison moving through my veins. Brooke, my wife, slept with Tyler, her coworker. It happened at the business conference in Chicago, the one I helped her prep for, the one I drove her to the airport for, the one I told her she'd crush. A cold shock lit up in my chest and spread outward like ice water. My mind went blank, wiped clean, like someone pulled the plug on every thought I had. The laptop slid out of my hands and thumped onto the couch cushion. The news anchor on TV turned into static in the background. My hands were shaking as I typed, my fingers running on autopilot. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. Your things will be on the porch in an hour. I didn't wait for a reply. I couldn't. I stood up and started for the bedroom, moving like I was wading through deep water. Everything slow, surreal, and wrong. I felt nothing. Just a big, echoing emptiness, like a house after all the furniture's been hauled out, like a theater after the last person leaves. The numbness almost hurt more than pain. At least pain would have felt real. A few minutes later, the phone buzzed. Another text from Brooke. Oh my God, baby, I was just joking. You know my sense of humor. I'd never actually cheat on you. I read it, but there was no relief. No gratitude. No forgiveness bubbling up. Instead, something hard and cold settled in my chest like a stone. The joke was too specific, too detailed, too real. She used Tyler's actual name. She mentioned conference details. Nobody jokes that way unless there's truth underneath. I typed back without any emotion. I was joking too, about the porch. It wasn't true yet, but if she wanted to play games with life-ruining news dressed up as humor, I could play too. I pocketed the phone and walked into our bedroom with a clear, simple purpose. I opened the walk-in closet and grabbed a big black trash bag from the hall closet stash. Then I started packing her things, one by one, like I was prepping a suitcase for someone I barely knew. Her favorite blue dress, the one she wore on our anniversary last month, went in. The red cashmere sweater I bought her for Christmas, the one that cost me 2 weeks of overtime, went in. The designer heels lined up like little soldiers on the floor, every last pair, went in. I didn't study the items or linger on memories. These weren't keepsakes anymore. They were just objects that belonged to a stranger who'd shared my bed for 3 years while planning her exit. Next, the bathroom. Makeup, pricey skincare, hair tools, all of it into a smaller bag. Her toothbrush, prescription bottles, contact lens case. Piece by piece, I pulled her life out of our home while ours fell apart in real time. On the nightstand, I scooped up her stack of romance novels. The irony wasn't lost on me. Plotlines about forbidden love while she drafted her own. They went in the bag, too. When I finished, everything that was hers was gone from our shared spaces. It took exactly 53 minutes. I tied the bags tight and carried them to the front porch, lining them neatly by the door like some twisted care package. I set her house key on top of the biggest bag, the metal catching the late afternoon sun. It felt like closing a book I once thought had a better ending. I locked the front door and went back inside. The house changed immediately. Not just emptier, cleaner, lighter, like someone drained the poison from a wound. A calm settled over me, stiff and high like a wall. It kept the pain out, but it also kept out everything else. Love, trust, the ability to get hurt again. I didn't know it then, but that wall would become my sharpest weapon. The next morning, I went to work at Meridian Financial Services like it was any other Tuesday. I showered, shaved, put on my navy suit and red tie, and drove my Honda Civic through the same traffic I'd fought for 4 years. But everything had shifted. The office looked identical, beige cubicles, motivational posters, coffee-stained carpet, but I was seeing it all with different eyes. Harder eyes. I kept my head down and skipped the small talk, pretending my monitor held national secrets. Even so, I could feel the ripple. How conversations clipped off when I walked by, and how people gave me just enough space to make it obvious. Bad news sprints in a small office, and nothing moves faster than someone else's humiliation. It hit hardest at the 10 a.m. coffee break. A little knot of co-workers huddled by the machine, voices low. The second I stepped in to refill my water bottle, they scattered like roaches under a porch light. Amanda from accounting tried to paste things back together with a bright voice and a fake smile. Asked about my weekend plans, but the forced cheer only confirmed it. Everyone knew about Brooke's conference. I capped my bottle and turned to go. Behind me, I heard Matt Brennan, Tyler's buddy from sales, the guy who treats hooking up like it's a bracketed tournament, murmur what he probably thought was a whisper. Heard she and Reed were closing down the hotel bar every night. Guy's got game, I'll give him that. My blood went cold. I locked my jaw so tight it felt like my molars might crack, but I kept moving. No reaction. No show. As my hand touched the door, Kevin Holt from IT, our resident class clown, decided to add his bit. Bet the husband paid for the room, too, he said, loud enough to land. Then he laughed at his own line. Nothing like funding your wife's vacation hookup. The others joined in, thin, nervous chuckles, but laughter all the same. It wasn't comedy. It was cruelty, deliberate, precise, meant to stamp my place on the bottom rung. My free hand balled into a fist so tight my nails carved half-moons into my palm, but I didn't turn around. I walked out, down the hall, and back to my cube with slow, measured steps. The spreadsheet on my screen dissolved into a fog of cells and numbers. Inside my head, a new voice cleared its throat. Not sad, not even angry. Cold, tactical, merciless. They think I'll swallow this, it said. They think I'm the guy who gets cheated on and fades out, becomes the office punchline, and just takes it. They're wrong. They're reading the silence as weakness because I didn't flip a table and give them the scene they wanted. They don't get that quiet men are the most dangerous kind. The version of me who laughed at office parties, who ate sheet cake at birthdays and clapped at retirements, that guy was gone. The man sitting at desk 47B, staring through financial projections, would not forget. He would not forgive. He would make them regret every word, every smirk, every cheap laugh. I wasn't going to be the fool in this story. I was going to write the ending. I didn't go back to our apartment that night. I couldn't stomach walking into rooms with outlines where Brooke's things used to sit, or breathing air that still held her perfume. Instead, I drove across town to my buddy Ben's place. We roomed together in college, and he always kept a spare room for friends in a tailspin. I showed up with a duffel bag and no speech. He just nodded and pointed down the hall. I laid out what happened like I was reading a weather report, clear, dry, no drama. Ben kept waiting for me to crack, to show the kind of wreckage he assumed had to be there. But all I felt was that cold, solid purpose thumping in my chest like a second heartbeat. The next evening, I finally went home. Brooke was parked on the concrete steps outside our building, still wearing the same travel outfit from 5 days ago. When my car turned into the lot, she popped up fast, anger and desperation fighting on her face. "You can't just throw me out," she shouted as I walked to the door. "This is my home too. We're married." "I already did," I said, steady as stone. "Your stuff's been on the porch for 2 days." She flung her hands, voice pitching toward a shriek. "You're being pathetic. Tyler treats me like a real woman, not some fragile doll that needs protecting." The words were chosen to cut, to bait me into the old dance where she could steer the fallout. Instead, I looked at her the way you might study an interesting bug. Quiet, unmoved, and very much finished. My voice came out low and steady. "Brooke, you'd better hope Tyler can survive what's coming." She stared at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw real fear flicker across her face. She couldn't tell if I was serious. I was. After that night, everything shifted. I stopped thinking about Brooke, about our marriage, about the future we'd drawn on napkins and anniversaries. I stopped thinking about the past at all. I focused only on the work in front of me. They'd shown me what they thought I was, the weak husband, the clueless sap who gets cheated on and swallows it. Now I'd show them who I really am. I started digging into Tyler with the focus of a PI on a federal case. Full name: Tyler Anthony Reed, 32, born in Detroit, Michigan. Current address: a cramped studio on Elm Street, downtown. Job: sales at Meridian Financial. Base of $65,000 a year plus commission. Tenure: exactly 18 months and 12 days. That was the public layer, HR folder stuff. I needed the underlayer if I was going to dismantle him cleanly. It didn't take long to spot the rot. Tyler had a long, documented habit of puffing up expense reports, not sloppy mistakes, but careful, repeatable fraud. Small scores that add up over time. Dinners that never happened. Mileage claims padded by hundreds of miles on trips he actually took by train. Hotel upgrades, charged to the company while he bunked cheaper and pocketed the difference. The pattern was sneaky and polished, but I know accounting. I saw the tells other people miss. Receipt numbers in perfect sequence from 2 different cities on the same day, mileage beyond the real distance. Conference fees charged twice under different categories. His sales record told another story. Prior employers had flagged his aggressive tactics more than once. High pressure sliding into harassment. I found client notes requesting never to work with him again. One complaint spelled it out: sexual remarks to a female client at a business dinner. Then came the part that mattered most to me. The trail of office relationships that veered into predatory. Brooke wasn't his first target at Meridian. She was just the latest. There was Lauren from marketing, quietly transferred after things ended, and she filed an informal harassment complaint. Megan from customer service quit out of nowhere after what HR called a misunderstanding, which, in plain English, meant Tyler showed up at her apartment uninvited. I found at least 2 more women whose complaints had been buried under small settlements and NDAs. The pattern was simple. Use charm to reel in a coworker, toss her when bored, let the company mop up the mess with money and paperwork. I didn't stop at his HR shadow. I dug into his personal life, the stuff he thought was truly hidden. Tyler was neck-deep in gambling debt. Not a weekend blackjack habit, real debt. He owed multiple regional casinos, had maxed out 3 credit cards on betting sites, and was 2 months behind on his car note. His rent on that studio was a month overdue, with eviction notices filed and then mysteriously withdrawn, meaning he'd scraped together just enough to buy himself 30 more days. The guy who seduced my wife, strutting around like a high roller, was actually 1 missed payment from sleeping in his car. The whole act ran on borrowed money and delayed consequences. Worse, he had a cocaine problem he thought the blazer and smile could hide. The breadcrumbs were everywhere once you looked closely. Social posts with little references most people would miss. Late-night credit card charges at bars known for drug traffic. Photos and follows tying him to well-known downtown dealers. All of it sat there, patient and obvious, waiting for someone like me to pull the thread. And I was already pulling. I uncovered that he'd been buying drugs on company plastic and hiding it in plain sight. Dealer meetups filed as client consultations, actual drug buys tucked under entertainment. Once you know where to look, the paper trail lights up like runway markers. All of it became ammunition for the case I was building, my custom arsenal. I pulled together hard proof. Crisp photos of altered receipts, bank statements showing the gambling debt, credit reports that screamed financial freefall, HR files from old jobs documenting complaints, and screenshots tying him to dealers online. I sorted everything with surgeon-level precision: dates, amounts, cross-checks, and timelines that made the fraud read like a novel with chapters. Because that's exactly what I was assembling. A legal roadmap that could end Tyler's career and maybe walk him straight into federal time. Wire fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement. They think I'm the villain. I told myself one night in my home office, buried in printouts and spreadsheets. Fine, I'll be the one they fear. That thought ran the engine for me after Brooke's betrayal. The man they laughed at in the break room? He was gone. In his place stood someone who didn't care about the high road, only about consequences. I worked from home for days, burning vacation time like kindling so I could focus. The dossier I built on Tyler Reed would have impressed a federal task force. Every document verified, every claim backed by multiple sources, every timeline checked and double-checked. I didn't want to bruise him. I wanted to wipe the slate. Job, freedom, finances, reputation, future. I wanted Brooke to watch her choice crumble and realize she'd underestimated the man she betrayed. Then I started making anonymous calls to widen the net. I rang up former co-workers at his old companies, posing as a hiring manager doing a background check. What they told me was uglier than the official records: sexual harassment, leaning on women in the office, stealing credit for other people's work, manipulation that went way past his bedroom conquests. I called current and former clients, too, acting like I was vetting him for a partnership. More stories poured out: padded invoices, promises he never delivered, lines crossed in business meetings. One woman said Tyler pushed her to meet at his apartment to discuss contract details in a more relaxed setting. The picture sharpened. A fundamentally corrupt guy who saw every relationship as a mark and kept getting away with bigger stunts because no one connected the dots. Connecting dots is what I do for a living. I dug into Brooke, too, ammo for the divorce. What I found was just as damning. She'd been laying out her exit plan for months, maybe longer. I uncovered secret email accounts, hidden financials, and clear proof that Brooke had been siphoning money out of our joint accounts into personal ones I didn't even know existed. It wasn't a one-off slip. It was a pattern, regular transfers just under the threshold that would trigger alerts, each one tucked between normal bills like a stowaway. She'd used our shared cards to buy gifts for Tyler, steakhouse dinners, tailored shirts, new shoes, even jewelry I'd stupidly assumed was for her. Over 6 months, the total she bled out of our marriage topped 15 grand, spread across multiple cards and dozens of innocent transactions. Then came the part that stung in a different way. I found signs she'd been feeding Tyler confidential information from my job, client numbers, pieces of our strategy deck, even little personal details about coworkers she picked up from my casual talk at home. That wasn't just cheating. That was theft and corporate espionage. Hard violations of confidentiality that could nail her in civil court and light her up criminally. By the time I was done, I had enough to shut them both down: career, freedom, finances, reputation. My dossier ran past 200 pages, with exhibits and backups that filled 3 separate file boxes. I used tabs, dividers, and an index so clean that a prosecutor could follow it in one pass. I wasn't guessing, I was proving. I launched the campaign on a Monday morning and got to the office before sunrise so I could work alone. I'd spent the weekend crafting tight, professional, anonymous emails from several burner accounts I'd set up on public library machines across town. No names, no breadcrumbs, just facts anyone could verify. The first email went to Diane Walsh, our HR director. The subject line was spaced out like a fire alarm. URGENT. EMPLOYEEFRAUDANDMISCONDUCT. IMMEDIATEINVESTIGATION. Inside, I laid out Tyler's expense account scheme. High-resolution scans of altered receipts, bank statements showing suspicious patterns, plus a timeline mapping systematic theft over the last 18 months. I added an impact analysis in plain English. About $37,000 skimmed through bogus meals, mileage, and upgrades. The second email hit Alex Parker, our regional sales manager. It detailed Tyler's inappropriate relationships with female coworkers and the paper trail of complaints that got ignored or smothered. I attached copies of informal reports, statements from former employees, and evidence of the company's failure to investigate. I didn't rant. I framed the liability: hostile work environment exposure, and a very public lawsuit waiting to happen. The third went to the confidential ethics hotline. I documented Tyler's cocaine use and how it bled into his performance, client relationships, and our brand. Photos where he was obviously impaired at company events, card charges at known hotspots disguised as client entertainment, and client notes describing erratic, late, and sloppy. I didn't stop with internal channels. I took it to people who could end his lifestyle, not just his job. A full report went to IRS criminal investigation, unreported gambling winnings, corporate funds used for personal expenses, and off-the-books income from side gigs. Even without the rest, the tax evasion piece alone was enough to kick off a federal case with real penalties and real time. I notified his landlord with documented drug activity in the unit, photos, dates, and third-party statements. In our state, that's an immediate eviction trigger and potential charges for maintaining a drug premises. I alerted several of his creditors with a neat packet: financials, assets he hadn't disclosed, and proof of false statements on loan applications. That kind of file doesn't get debated. It moves accounts straight to collections and flags him for fraud review. I even sent material to the State Gaming Commission, records of his problem gambling and the pattern that looked a whole lot like laundering, considering he'd been funneling corporate cards into bets and cash advances that never flowed back to the company. Every message was calm and professional. Every claim was sourced and cross-checked. I included timelines, exhibits, and simple summaries so an investigator could digest the case in minutes and dig deep in hours. I kept copies of everything: receipts, screenshots, mailed confirmations where possible. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a controlled detonation. And as I closed each folder and logged each submission, one thought settled in and stayed. They wanted a fool. Instead, they got an auditor with nothing left to lose, and all the time in the world to connect every last dot. I'd spent years in accounting learning how to lay out numbers so even a jury could follow them. Clean, convincing, and airtight. Every line I put forward had at least 2 independent sources. Every accusation came strapped to documentation no one could wave away. The plan moved faster than I'd let myself hope. By Tuesday afternoon, Tyler got summoned into an urgent sit-down with HR, legal, and what looked like outside investigators in sober suits I didn't recognize. From my cubicle, I watched him pass. No swagger, no grin. Just jittery hands and a confused stare like he couldn't figure out why his carefully built stage set was tilting. The meeting dragged on for more than 3 hours. In that window, I saw security make multiple trips, hauling out boxes of files and a couple of desktops, cords dangling like cut vines. Whatever this was, it wasn't a wrist slap. It was a full-blown investigation with teeth. About an hour after the door finally opened, 2 security guards walked Tyler back past my desk for the last time. His face had gone gray and glossy with sweat. His fingers shook around a small cardboard box, photos, a mug, a stapler, a life downsized to a carry-out container. When he reached my row, he stopped. We locked eyes. For a second, I saw it all. Fear, confusion, the animal panic of a man who suddenly understands what's about to happen to him. He seemed to sense I was part of it, even if he couldn't picture the whole machine I'd set in motion. "Please," he whispered, voice cracking. "I don't know what you told them, but please tell them it's not true. I'll make it up to you. I'll do anything." I gave him the same empty look I'd practiced for weeks. No recognition, no anger, no mercy, and said nothing. The guards, impatient now, nudged him forward. He kept moving. That was the last time I ever saw Tyler Reed. My revenge, though, was only just getting started. That evening, Brooke showed up at my building again. This time she didn't hover on the steps. She pounded the door until I opened it, and then shouldered past me like she owned the place. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her hair was a snarl. "They fired him," she shouted, voice ragged from crying. Tyler collapsed in the parking lot when security dragged him out. "You destroyed his life." I was on the couch with the evening news murmuring in the background, a glass of wine in my hand, and a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. I didn't bother to look up. "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "I cleaned up a mess." Her crying ratcheted into something high and jagged. "This isn't you. You're not this person. The man I married would never." I turned and met her eyes. Whatever she saw in my face made her take a half step back. "You're right," I said softly. "That man died the day you cheated. You killed him with that text." Later that same night, the night of Tyler's termination, I finally let myself breathe. I switched from wine to water and let the anchors talk while my mind went quiet for the first time in a long time. That's when I heard it. Fast, heavy footsteps in the hall outside, stopping at my door. I'd forgotten to lock it when I came in, a detail that used to bother me. Now, I almost welcomed the test. I wanted to see just how far I'd changed. The handle turned. Brooke blew in like a storm front. No knock, no hello, standing in my living room with her chest heaving, makeup and tears smeared into charcoal lines. Her voice was scraped raw from screaming, and when she finally got words out, they came like broken glass. "They fired him," she screamed again, both fists clenched at her sides, as if volume alone could pull the day back from the brink. Tyler collapsed in the parking lot when security walked him out. He couldn't even stand. "You destroyed his life." I didn't move from the couch. I didn't even look at her at first. I kept my eyes on the TV, took a slow sip of water, and let her words pass over me like background noise. When I finally answered, my voice was flat, empty of anything. "No," I said. "I cleaned up a mess." The line hit Brooke like a slap. The man she'd known for 5 years would have apologized, tried to explain, shown some hint of guilt. This version of me gave her nothing but cold indifference. "You can't be serious," she shouted, voice climbing into panic. "This isn't you. This isn't the man I married. You're supposed to be kind, compassionate. You used to care about people." I turned then, and whatever was in my face made her flinch backward. There was something new in my eyes, predatory, calculating. The kind of thing that wakes up the primitive part of your brain and tells you to run. A thin, cold smile pulled at my mouth. It wasn't friendly. You're right, I said, and even I could hear the satisfaction hiding in it. That man died the day you cheated. You killed him with that text. Brooke stared, and I watched the realization land. The man she'd hurt, the one she discarded, he wasn't coming back. In his place stood what she'd made. Not Evan Miller, who trusted blindly and forgave easily, but someone rebuilt out of what she broke. What have I done? She whispered, barely audible. I rose from the couch slowly and walked toward her, each step measured. She backed away until the wall stopped her. You showed me who I am, I said, quietly, which made it worse. You taught me that kindness gets read as weakness, that trust looks like stupidity, and that forgiveness is just another way to spell fool. She cried then. Real tears, not the staged kind she'd used before. This was fear, understanding, consequences finally connecting. I never meant for this to happen, she sobbed. I never wanted to hurt you this badly. But you did, I said, stopping close enough for her to see there was no doubt left in me. And now you get to live with what you created. I turned away and went back to the couch, lifted my glass, and returned my attention to the news as if she weren't there. That dismissal did more damage than shouting ever could. She stood for a long minute, crying softly, searching my face for some trace of the man she used to know. I gave her nothing. No comfort, no reassurance, no hint that the old Evan still existed. Finally, she moved to the door. At the threshold, she looked back. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't answer. I didn't even look up. The door clicked shut, and I kept watching the segment about corporate fraud, how white-collar criminals underestimate the people around them until it's too late. I lifted my water in a private toast. They thought I'd crumble under betrayal, fall into grief and self-pity like 100 other husbands who get publicly humiliated. They figured I'd take my place as the quiet victim in someone else's story. Instead, I became the one they can't outrun. The man who read Brooke's text weeks ago is gone, destroyed by the same people who misjudged him. What's left is harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. They wanted me broken. What they built instead was their worst nightmare, a man with nothing left to lose and everything to gain from their downfall.